Hello and welcome to Timeless Tabletop Gaming, and in this episode we're going to be taking a look at what's inside this box.
So then, as Brad Pitt once asked in quite a weird way, what's in the box? Thankfully in my case, not the dismembered head of a loved one, although if my wife checks my eBay account then mine might end up in one. No, contained in this box is actually a time capsule of priceless 90s Warhammer nostalgia. Well, I say priceless, it actually cost me £45.21, which hopefully we can all agree by the end of this video was an absolute bargain. This pickup was the result of a somewhat impulsive eBay auction bid some months ago. At first glance it looked like a battered and incomplete copy of 4th edition Warhammer Fantasy Battles, but the blurry photos suggested some other treasures inside, so I popped a cheeky bid in at the last minute and was surprised to see I'd won the thing. When it arrived I tried to squirrel it away upstairs, but the all-seeing eye caught me and asked what it was. I replied, oh, it's just something for a video. So here we are making a video as a convenient excuse for me buying more Warhammer that I don't need. So let's get into this thing and see exactly what treasures lie within. Once I'd finally fought my way through the packaging, I found myself staring at a box I hadn't seen since it was on shelves at my local Games Workshop back in the early 90s. It was in a bit of a sorry state and caked in dust, but man, that box art is just as glorious as I remember it. The 4th edition of Warhammer Fantasy Battle was released in October 1992. It was the first to be released in the format of the now familiar starter box. Previous editions had just been in the form of rulebooks, whereas 4th edition contained everything a beginner would need to play the game. Rulebooks, dice, templates, terrain, and the 2 starter armies, the Noble High Elves and the Vicious Goblins. The stunning front cover was painted by Jeff Taylor, and it gives us a glimpse into the wider world of Warhammer. It sparks the viewer's imagination, showing how the contents of the box are just the beginning. Warhammer battles aren't just about spearmen and archers, but boar-riding orcs, rock-lobbing catapults, heroes on griffins, and mages shooting lightning, sold separately and available from your nearest Games Workshop. This was the edition of the game that was waiting for me when I made the familiar transition from HeroQuest enjoyer to fully fledged Games Workshop addict. Despite this, I don't think I ever actually owned this edition of the game. I collected the miniatures for an Empire army, and even played the odd game with friends, but the rules we used were just ones we'd picked up and half remembered from the exciting in-store demo games with enthusiastic ponytailed staff members. As an aside, I'm convinced that Games Workshop have no idea just how influential their staff members were back then. I don't think they'd be raking in the billions they are now if not for the passionate red shirts whipping young impressionable children into a fantasy frenzy. Every actual game of Warhammer I've played since those formative demo games has been tinged with disappointment, as I realised people don't generally shout and cheer and make the noises of the weapons and the death knells of the combatants, at least not for the full 3 hours it takes to play a game. Honestly, there was nowhere I'd rather be in the 90s than a Games Workshop store. They were such fun places to hang out and the staff members were a big part of that. If you worked in a Games Workshop store back then, I salute you. So anyway, despite this being such a hugely nostalgic object for me, it's not something I ever actually owned. Opening up the box lid, I was presented with an absolute mess of miniatures, paints, dice and other paraphernalia. Let's dig in. I was straight away drawn to the old Citadel paint pots, and the first thing I had to do was open one up and inhale that old familiar smell. Despite having not used these paints in close to 30 years, that smell has always stayed with me. Nothing takes you back to a time and a place like a particular scent, does it? I'd seen from the eBay photos that there were some old paints in the box, but I wasn't expecting quite so many. I'm over the moon to have this collection of old paints again. And of the lot, only the Space Wolves Grey has dried out. All the others were still in perfect condition. Why is it that so many of my modern Citadel paints have inexplicably dried out or separated, yet these old pots can sit in a loft for 3 decades and look as good as new? It's not always rose-tinted goggles, is it? Some things really were just better back then. There was also a ton of little Humbrel and Revel enamel pots, which also have their own nostalgic charm. I remember my best friend's mum painting his HeroQuest set in these super glossy enamels. Good memories, but not something I'll be revisiting. The next thing that caught my eye was this out-of-place Epic 40,000 Elder Warhost. I've never dipped my toe into Epic, but I remember this edition of the game coming out in the late 90s, some years after 4th edition had left store shelves, as the 5th edition Warhammer art on the box here would indicate. Inside, the contents were untouched and looking stunning. I haven't seen many Epic minis up close, but the sculpts are actually really nicely detailed for the scale. It's definitely a game I'd like to explore more in future. Who knows, maybe this could be the start of something. Next, I decided to take a look at some of the paper and cardstock bits. Oh man, I'd completely forgotten about this old painting guide leaflet. 10-year-old me ignored most of the invaluable advice here, and always ended up like that scene in The Simpsons where Homer tries to build a barbecue.
Yeah, that's one fine-looking barbecue pit. Why doesn't mine look like that?
Yeah, not much has changed, to be honest. Look at how few paints there were back then. Mixing your own shades was very much encouraged rather than having a different paint for base, layer and highlights. I'm always nervous about colour mixing as I worry about not being able to recreate the shades on subsequent models, but maybe I should give it a go. I've come across a few of these little fold-up leaflets over the years, but they never fail to make me smile. The Necromunda art dates it to after 95, so I doubt it came in this box originally, but these used to pop up everywhere. There was also another one in here which had been updated to show the 5th edition of the game. I didn't realise there were actual variations of these. Next up was this card cutout miniature of Azag the Slaughterer on his Wyvern. This was one of several card proxies in the box, including a bolt thrower and a hero on Griffin for the High Elves, and Grom the Paunch's Chariot and a Rock Lubber for the Orcs and Goblins. The idea being that you could play larger games with these stand-in miniatures while saving up for the real things. Sadly, Azag here was the only one still remaining in my set. I've heard it said that these are technically tournament legal models, but I wonder if anyone has actually put that to the test. Next up included were movement trays, and I can't imagine these would have worked very well. They look like the miniatures would be sliding about all over the place on these. Also some dice, including an artillery and scatter dice, and you can never have enough of these. And who doesn't love a classic white D6? Randomly, there was also an old Star Wars Tazo. These could be found in bags of Walker's crisps around 97, I think. This takes me back to my secondary school canteen with the taste of cheese and onion Walkers still in my mouth. Happy days. There was also this weird little sprue, and I had no idea what this was from. I'm sure someone out there will recognise it. Then the magic cards. There were 10 of the original 12 here. I was missing a Destroy Spell Scroll and the Sword of Swift Slaying. Well, who wants to slay swiftly anyway? I then found some cheat sheets from the 5th edition starter set. I later compared these with the 4th edition ones, and there isn't a great deal of difference, so I imagine these would work just as well for either edition. Last up was a more detailed painting guide with a 50p sticker on it. I don't remember these costing money, so I think this person may have been swindled. Nowadays it's well worth 50p, as it has some great tips from the legendary Mike McVeigh, as well as lots of pictures of beautifully painted miniatures from the Heavy Metal team. Right, let's have a look and see what state these miniatures are in. I'm expecting a lot of thick paint and broken spears. Well, here's a nice example of an untouched High Elf Spearman. Still a great looking miniature, I think. I'm fairly sure the only one of these I ever owned was as a freebie from a speed painting competition at one of the games days. And here's a surprisingly nicely painted Goblin Spearman. Much better than the stuff I was painting at the time anyway. I reckon with a wash and a highlight it'd scrub up quite well. Here's a similarly painted Goblin Archer. Some more 5th edition oddities with a Saurus Warrior. And a nice unpainted High Elf Archer. Right, there's a few bags of miniatures here, so let's tip them out and organise them and see how many we've got. Wow, again from the photos I didn't expect quite so many miniatures in here. As it turns out I have 20 out of 20 of the High Elf Spearmen, 19 out of 20 of the High Elf Archers, 32 out of 32 Goblin Spearmen and 31 out of 32 Goblin Archers, albeit with a few broken bows, though the broken pieces are there so will be easy enough to repair. Also included were a handful of Saurus Warriors and Bretonnian Bowmen. All in all I'd call that a very decent haul for £45. I mean, even just for the 100 odd miniatures it works out as less than 50p a mini, which is always good going, even for monopose plastics. But for me, the highlight is definitely the collection of classic paints. I'm so thrilled with these and I can't wait to try out some retro painting projects. As a Warhammer 4th edition starter set, it's certainly missing some key things. Not having the card buildings is a shame, but the lack of the rulebooks is the most notable omission. To rectify that, I picked up the rulebook, the bestiary and the Battle for Malcathron Past books from eBay for around £20 or so. With that, the box felt a lot more complete. It would be nice to find some of the card cutout miniatures, or who knows, maybe even their proper metal equivalents. Either way, this unboxing has really got me in the mood to start collecting and painting a classic Warhammer army again. Thankfully, I do have just the project ready to go, and you may see some more on that very soon. I hope you got a nostalgic kick out of this video. If so, then please consider leaving a like and a comment. Let me know what your memories are from this edition of the game. Did you own this starter set? What armies were you collecting at the time? Are you also a creepy paint sniffer? Let me know. I'd love to reminisce in the comments section with you. Thanks so much for watching, and until next time.